So we're going to look at the Mishnah now on Daf Yud Tes Amud Beis. And I have a little bit of an introduction here to the Mishnah. A person was makabel on himself Nazirus when he was in Chutz La'aretz. And he observed his Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz. And according to the Torah, he has fulfilled his mitzvah of Nazirus. The Torah doesn't say that a Nazir has to be in Eretz Yisrael. However, we have what's called Gzeras Tumas Amamim, which means that the Rabbanan said that the Avir of Chutz La'aretz is Metame. And this is based on a Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Tesvav. It has to do with the fact that the Goyim were burying their dead underneath in all sorts of places. Let's not go into it too detailed. In any event, if a Nazir was Makabel Nazirus and Chutz La'aretz, then the Rabbanan imposed the Knas on him. And that means that when he comes to Eretz Yisrael, he has to start his Nazirus again. And on that issue, we have Machlokes Tanoim recorded here in the Mishnah. Mishin Nazar, he took upon himself Nazirus and Chutz La'aretz, Nazirus Harbe, which means more than the 30-day minimum standard. The Hishlim es Naziruso, he actually completed his Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz. And we're going to start with the opinion of Beit Shammai, the Achaf Bola Arts. Now, after completing his Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz, he made it to Eretz Yisrael, and now he wants to be makriv his karbanos of a Nazir as part of the termination of his Nazirus. And when it says in the Mishnah of Achaf Bola Arts, it means that only accidentally did he find his way to Eretz Yisrael. That's what it sounds like. Bala Arts. He happened to come to Eretz Yisrael. But Tosas already, Dibram Asol Mi, which is about 5 lines up before the end of the Amud, he already writes that Lav Dafka. And it doesn't mean that he by chance found himself on an Air Canada flight to Israel, because El Al is not flying. So he actually is obligated to come to Eretz Yisrael in order to be makriv his karbanos. And not only that, midrabanan, he's going to be required to count his Nazirus in Eretz Yisrael, says Beit Shammai, a full 30 days. So even though he counted 30 days of Nazirus and observed those days of Chutz La'aretz, he's got to start counting again in Eretz Yisrael. Beis Hillel Omrim Nazir B'tchila. It's not just enough to add another 30 days, say Beis Hillel, but rather they imposed the Knas on him, and whatever number of days he had accepted upon himself, like let's say, for example, he was in New York and he accepted upon himself a Nazirus of 100 days. Then, according to Beis Hillel, he's going to have to start from scratch when he gets there to Yisrael. He's going to have to count a full 100 days. Whereas Beit Shammai were okay with him fulfilling one round of Nazirus, which is a 30-day Nazirus period. And if we try to understand Beis Hillel, then the Knas that the Chachamim imposed upon him, which is the entire period of Nazirus that he accepted upon himself in Chutz La'aretz, he has to do a repeat performance, because they considered it as if he took Nazirus upon himself in a cemetery. And the law is that if a Nazir, or I should say a person who's going into Nazirus, accepts upon himself Nazirus while he's standing in a Beis HaKvaros, then those days that he observes will not count towards his Nazirus. He's got to get himself out of the cemetery. And here, the entire Chutz La'aretz is considered like one large cemetery, based on this Knas D'Rabbanan. So in any event, Beis Hillel are of the opinion he's got to start his Nazirus from scratch. Now, if he took a Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz of 30 days, then, okay, he still has to do a full 30 days in Eretz Yisrael, but the Mishnah is talking about a case where he took upon himself a Nazirus of more than 30 days. And the reason for that is because only in that scenario would there be a machlokus between Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel. If he had taken upon himself a Nazirus of 30 days in Chutz La'aretz, then Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai would be saying the identical thing, that when he gets there to Israel, he has to observe 30 days of Nazirus. Ma'isa b'Ilenia Malka, she was in Chutz La'aretz. She was an offspring of the Chashmonaim, and the Mishnah reports that Shaholach b'Nola Milchama, her son went out to battle via Amra, and she made the following proclamation: Im yavo b'ni min hamalcham b'shalom, if my son returns peacefully, ehei nazira sheva shanim. She took upon herself in Chutz La'aretz a nazirus that would extend for a period of 7 years. Uba b'na min hamalcham b'shalom, her son came back peacefully, alive and well, and she was Makayim HaNazirus for 7 days. Now, on the very last day of HaNazirus, before the end of the 7-year period, she finds herself in Eretz Yisrael, where she came in order to bring the Karbanos to complete HaNazirus. And Beis Hillel, in a consistent way with their view, they imposed upon herself, on Helenia Malka, the regular knas that would apply to anyone who observes his Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz. Now what happens? Ubesof Sheva Shanim, she counts another 7 years of Nazirus, all told 14 years of Nazirus, nitmes. And before she completes the second round of 7 years, she contracts Tumah. And the Torah says, Hayom HaRishon Yiflu, that Tumah completely negates all of the Nazirus. That's called Stiras Minyan HaNazirus. Now, here we have a point made by Rabbi Kiva, but before we get to Rabbi Kiva, let's just finish the Mishnah. Nimtzeis Nazira Esher B'Achashana. Now she has a third round of Nazir, 7 years, times 3 is 21 years. And Rabbi Yehuda L'Haisa Nazir El Arba Esrei Shana. We don't know exactly what Rabbi Yehuda is adding here by telling us that it was only 14 years of Nazirus when L'Maisa was 21 years of Nazirus. And here we have a comment of Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Akiva says that after she completes her 7-year period of Nazirus and she became a Tmeya, he says, she will not bring a carbon tahara, which is a special carbon that a Nazir Shenitma brings. See, on a Doraisa level, she observed her Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz. Although the Rabbanan imposed the Knas, and Beis Hillel is going to invalidate those 7 years of Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz, but on a Doraisa level, she actually fulfilled her Nazirus in Chutz La'aretz. And therefore it was a Nazirus of Tara, because she only contracted Tumah in the second round of 7 years when she got to Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, Midin Torah, according to Torah law, Kfar Siyama min Limnos as a Nazirus. She already fulfilled her Nazirus. Now, there's no such thing as a Karban D'Rabbanan. That entity doesn't exist. Ein Chacham Yechol L'Sakin Shetavi Karban Tumah. Sharei Ein B'Koach Chachamim Lakar Dovim in Ator B'Kuvasei. The Chachamim do not have the authority to override the Torah law B'Kuvasei and allow her to bring a carbon when she's not chayiv in the carbon on the Doraisa level. However, the Karen Ora, who lived not long ago, he says that no, she has to bring a korban tmeah. Why? Because once the Chachamim obligated her to be a Nazir in Eretz Yisrael, she's a complete Nazira Gemura. In other words, it's basically as if she accepted upon herself a brand new set of 7 years of Nazirus. The Gemara says, Ketani Reisha. It says in the beginning of the Mishnah, Beit Shammai Omrim, Nazir, Shloshim Yom Beisil Omrim, Nazir, Bat Chila, Lema, Behaka Miflagi. Shall we suggest that this is the subject of the Machlokas? The Beit Shammai Savri, when the Rabbanan made this Zera of Tuval Eretz Amim Mishum Avira Gozroleh, they didn't institute a Zera for someone who touches the ground of Eretz Yisrael or is Mahil, which means he leans over a Gush Ofar of Eretz Ha'amim, but rather the Gzera was on the Avira of Eretz Amim. And the nafkamina would be if he goes into Eretz Amim flying in midair. Now, how can you go into Eretz Amim flying in midair? Obviously, with an air cannon of flight. And that's called in the Lashon Hashas, Shida, Teva, Umigdal. These are different kinds of, moving wagons where you don't touch the ground at all. You're always in the wagon, but you're in the airspace of Eretz Ha'amim. And you didn't come in contact neither with the offer of Chutz La'aretz, nor you mile did you lean over the gush offer of Eretz Ha'amim. And that's the nature of the Chachamim's Gzeira of Tumah on Avir Eretz Ha'amim. So the Gemara thinks that according to Beit Shammai, since the Rabbanu were machmir with regard to Tumas Eretz Ha'amim, that it's mitami even if it's avir, therefore it's sufficient that she soteres shloshim yom. It's not like Tumah Dorais, it's a brand new Tumah that doesn't exist on the Torah radar screen. And therefore, we can be more makil with this Tumah. And it's sufficient for her to observe in Eretz Yisrael 30 days of Nazirus. And we're not afraid that somebody might make a mistake and think that even if someone is Tameh, a Tumah Doraisa, then we just negate 30 days and we're only supposed to 30 days. No one is going to make a swap and confuse this Tumah of Avira D'Eretz Amamim with a Tumah Doraisa when a person comes in contact with a corpse. So Tumas Mes is Doraisa. In cases number 1 and number 2, Naga, there was a Maga, or But the fact that he goes over a mess with a Shida Tevu Migdal flying in the air, that would not be Mitami. So we see that according to Beit Shammai, the entity of Tumas Amamin is a separate entity that's Mitami Ba'avira and will not be confused with the Tumah of Mes, of the Tumah Doraisa. And now we turn to Daf Chaf, who Beis Hillel Sabri, Mishum Gusha Gazru Aleha. According to Beis Hillel, the Rabbanan only instituted a Tumah in Chutz La'aretz that would be identical to the Tumah of Doraisa, which means either you were Nogea or you were Mahil al Gush Ofar of Eretz Amim. That's when the Rabbanan would go to the Tumah. But if you go into the airspace of New York, Baltimore, Miami, or even the Heilige of Toronto, and you're only in the Shida Tevu Migdal, and you didn't have any contact, or Mahil, then according to Beis Hillel, the Rabbanan never instituted the Gzeira of Tumas Eretz Amim, and now this Tumah is identical to Tumah Doraisa. And now we have to be worried about the possibility of making a mistake and confusing that tumah with tumah d'oraisa. And therefore we have to impose upon the Nazir who observed his Nazirus or her Nazirus and Chutzah the same strictures as if he or she contracted tumah, which means that it's soser the entire Nazirus. And if there was a Nazirus of 7 years, then Beis Hillel insists you have to start from scratch in Eretz Yisrael with a full package of Nazirus of 7 years. Because Beis Hillel argue against Beis Shammai, if you would only institute a gzera of stira of 30 days, then they might come confused and identify that with Tumah Doraisa when you touch a corpse and come to the mistaken, terrible conclusion that Tumah is only soser 30 days. And the Gemara rejects this. Look, this is not the subject of the debate between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Kuli Alma, everybody agrees, even Beis Hillel, Mishum Avira Gozroli. This is a separate entity of Tumas Avir without Mago, without Mahil. Beis Shammai Savri, Beis Shammai are of the opinion that this Tumah is so radically and essentially different than Tumah Doraisa because there was no Maga, that therefore we don't have a chash that they would make this jump and equation between this Tumah of Eretz Amamin, which is a Tumas Avir, and Tumah Doraisa of Metz. And therefore it's okay if we'll be makil on Tumas Eretz Amamin to be soser only 30 days. And therefore Bestam Nazirus Konisna, we will only impose a knas, a penalty of Stam Nazirus, which is 30 days. Beis Hillel Savri, Ki Konisna, when the Rabbanan made a knas, they established the knas that the Nazir should be B'tchilas Nazirus. He's got to start counting his Nazirus from 0, from the beginning. And even though this Tumah is not at all similar to Tumah Doraisa, because this Tumah is even the Avir, nevertheless, you know what? Not everybody knows that. It's not a Dover Golui, Yodua L'Kol, it's not something that's common knowledge. And the Rabbanan were choshesh, they were suspecting that maybe there'll be certain people who will think that this is a Tumah Doraisa, and they'll come to be Mekil and assume that even in a Tumah Doraisa, the stira is only a 30-day stira, and therefore they made a gzera that even this Tumah should be soser the entire Nazirus, and they're required beginning the entire Nazirus from the get-go from 0. And now at this point, the Gemara goes back to Rabbi Yehuda, who's brought now Mishnah, the Maisa Be'eleni Malka, and according to Rachamim, that Hileni was in a Zira for a total of 21 years, and we explained that it was 3 sets of 7 years. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda says that she was only in a Zira 14 years. What's that all about? Ibaylahu. The Gemara vacillates back and forth. What detail in the Shita the Chachamim, who said that it was 21 years, did Rabbi Yehuda reject? And here are the 2 possibilities. One possibility is that that in the case where, in that scenario where Hileni Malka contracted Tumah at the end of her 7-year period in Eretz Yisrael, she was Soseres Minyana, therefore she needs another 7 years. However, we're not going to calculate the first 7 years. Umashalo Monza, Sheva Shonim Achmas Hagasa li Eretz Yisrael, Hu Mishum Shecholek Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim B'din Zeh. And according to Rabbi Yehuda's take on Beis Shammai, I'll leave Beis Shammai, all she needs is 30 days when she gets to Eretz Yisrael. So that's perfect. So she comes to Eretz Yisrael, she has 30 days of Nazirus. On the last of the 30 days, she contracted Tumah, so she needs another period of, just 1 second. She did 7 years in Chutz La'aretz. Let's just get the mathematics here. And now she gets there to Israel, and she does. One second now. Okay. One second, I don't have the calculation yet. Again, she became Tmeya on the last day of the 7th year when she arrived in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, what happens now? How do we get 14 years? I'm just going to try to figure this out for a minute here with the footnote. Masha Atua Shabesof Yimei Knas Soteres as Iker Nazirusa Shemonsa B'chutz La'aretz here B'shita Yishum Shana Roam Keilu Nazir Shenoga B'chutz La'aretz when she had close Shloshim Shloshim Shenitmei Yom Shloshim Soteres Kol Hashevesh. Oh, I see. So in other words, it works like this. She came to Eretz Yisrael at the end of the 7 years of Chutz La'aretz. And now she observes, right, and she became Tmeir. Okay, so that's going to be a stira. One second. So now, wait a second, I had it and I lost it. So she, so she needs another 30 days in Eretz Yisrael. That's Beit Shammai, right? Beit Shammai says that we need another 30 days in Eretz Yisrael. So she had 7 years in Chutz La'aretz. Now she has 30 days in Eretz Yisrael. And then on the last of the 30 days, that's it. On the last of the 30 days, she contracted tumah. And now she's going to have to redo the entire 7 years of Chutz La'aretz.
Right.
For a total of 15 years plus 30 days, I guess.
Right. So I think it's really 14 years and 30 days.
Right. So Tara says, I see. Because the 30 days that she observes, based on the Knas, according to Beit Shammai, when she arrives in Eretz Yisrael, that's a continuation of her Naziris and Chutz La'aretz. So
right.
The Chutz La'aretz becomes a chiyuv or an obligation of 7 years plus 30 days. Now she contracted tumah at the end of the 30 days, and she needs to redo the Naziris of 7 years. Oh, Dilma. Now the Gemara has another possibility. Let's see what the other tzad is. That Rabbi Yehuda has a different take on exactly what the scenario is, what the mice is.
Tell them from the Rothschild.
Wow.
You better tell whoever else is making, then we'll have 100.
Well, I told them Leo 10, so 10 and 10 is 20, and we'll do 10, we're up to 30.
Right.
Plus we have 2 extra ones. Okay. So you hear this? He says, Vishalom nitveis, I'll leave it to Beis Hillel. Rabbi Yehuda has a different take on exactly what happened with the Lady Amalka. According to Rabbi Yehuda's version of what happened with the Lady Amalka, then lo nitmes, she did not contract tumah. She was in a zero for 14 years because Rabbi Yehuda agrees to the Chachamim, right? The Chachamim who say that when she arrives in Eretz Yisrael, she has to start her Nazirus all over again.
Right.
No tumah here in this picture. V'shalom nitmes. It's 14 years because it's the 7 years of Chutz La'aretz plus the 7 years in Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly why the Masifta here writes something that throws me for a loop. He says, Maskim Rabbi Yehuda l'divrei Chachamim. I don't know why he has to add the word Chachamim here. This is Beis Hillel. Okay, I guess maybe he's calling Beis Hillel Chachamim. So this is the Safek, which which the Gemara, it doesn't say who. I guess the Bnei Yeshiva were vacillating that Toshma. And we're going to look in our Mishnah, and it says also la'aretz v'orua beis Hillel shetehei nezira od sheva shanim acheros. So she needed another 7 years, and then at the end of that 7-year period, she contracted tumah, and therefore, according to that version, she was a nazir for 21 years. And Rabbi Yehuda says she was only a nazir for 14 years. The Isal Kedaikle Bishenitmes, the Aliba de Beit Shammai, according to the first side in the Gemara's Safek, Ihachi, why does it say in the Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shlo Hoysa Nazir al Arbasrei Shana, Havi Arbasrei Shana Ushloshim Yomi Boile? That was our problem. That according to the first version of the Safek of Rabbi Yehuda in Beit Shammai, then it's really 14 years plus 30 days. Right, because when she gets to Eretz Yisrael at the end of the 7 years, she has to count another 30 days according to Beit Shammai. That was the knas. It was only a limited knas of 30 days. And then after the 30 days, then since she was nitmes, and we see that 30 days as a tag on to the 7 years in Chutz La'aretz, therefore the entire Nazirus falls apart and she needs another 7 years. 7 plus 7 plus 30 is 14 years plus 30 days. And therefore, we have no choice but to accept the second possibility in our interpretation of Yehuda. And that means she did not contract tumah at all when she came to Eretz Yisrael at the end of 7 years. Beis Hillel ordained that she needs another 7 years in Nazirus, and all told she counts only 14 years. And Tanya Nami Hachi, we're going to support this with an additional proof from a Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer. Now we're talking about a case of a Nazir who contracted tumah on the very last day of his minyan Nazirus. And Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that the stira to his Nazirus only applies to 30 days. And he derives it from a pasuk. The Omar Kros Zos Toras HaNazir. And then it says Biyom Ulos. HaTorah Omra V'chinitma Biyom Ulos. When a Nazir contracts tumah on the Yom Ulos, it's strange that the publication of this Gemara left out the key words Biyom Ulos. Anyway, Tainlo Toras Nazir. Give him a Toras Nazir. Toras Nazir is Stam Nazir Shloshim Yom. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda holds that if there's a stira on the last day, now again, I don't know if it's only on the last day, but right now we're interpreting it as a stira on the last day, then he has to observe an additional 30 days of Nazirus. And therefore, we have no choice but to assume that, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Hileni lo nitma, and the whole row of 14 years was like Beis Hillel, because if we're going to assume that the Hora of Rabbi Yehuda, according to Beit Shammai, was 7 extra years because she was nitmes, and that's how he comes up with 14 years, that's impossible. Because since she was nitma on the last day of her minyan, that's only social according to Rabbi Yehuda 30 days. So she was only a Nazira for 7 years plus 60 days. So how could Rabbi Yehuda say that she was a Nazira for the full-fledged 14 years? And that leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Chaf Amud Aleph. But I think at this point, I think, we Baruch Hashem, we were able to get in at least a Chatzi Shir, as we say. And
yeah, I'm sorry.
No, don't Chas v'Shalom. This just didn't work out so well with my schedule, but Baruch Hashem. Okay, then.
Okay.
So you're back in Canada, and
Yep.
How's the weather? It's not the same as Florida, probably.
No, it was very cold the last couple of days, but today is warmer. Today is like 0. Yeah.
Today is 0.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
like
good.
32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Sounds warm to me.
Yeah, that's not bad.
How warm did it get in Florida?
It was around 70, one day got up to 80, 75.
Not bad.
Oh, very nice.
I'll take that any day.
Yeah.
All right. Let me wish you the best. All right, Colton.
Okay, thanks. You too.
Bye bye.